Decarbonization is front and center, but this year's Singapore Maritime Week, the industry, however, faces headwinds as it aims to lower emissions while adapting to sustainable energy. Roland Lim is on the ground at the Singapore Maritime Week with more. Roland.
Paul, alternative fuels like biomethane, ammonia, leading the maritime industry's move into decarbonization. But concerns about energy security may hamper Southeast Asia's shift to clean and green energy. For more on how companies can navigate this green transition, Sue-Ern Tan joins me now. She's head of the International Energy Agency's Regional Cooperation Center. Sue-Ern, good to have you on the show with us. First up, I guess, tell us about the energy landscape here in Southeast Asia and the developments that have happened in the last, say, 5 years.
Thank you, Roland. I mean, the Southeast Asia is an incredibly dynamic region, and it is a key driver of global energy trends from a global perspective. So, for example, over the next decade, we see that energy demand growth in Southeast Asia is going to be at 25% of the total global numbers. This is second only to India. Now, a lot of that growth is driven by the electricity sector. Obviously, this region wants to grow more economically. There's increased urbanization and really basic things like the increased need for cooling, air conditioning, refrigeration. So we see the need to really think about how we meet that energy demand growth that is so necessary for this region in a secure way, an affordable way, and where possible, in a clean way.
What are net zero goals looking like for governments, for companies here in Southeast Asia?
I think what's fantastic is that 8 out of the 10 countries in ASEAN have set net zero emissions goals. So there is a lot of clear ambition and political willingness to embrace the need to transition to a lower emissions economy. But of course, there is no clean transition if it's not one that's secure, not one that's affordable, and also, frankly, one that's not reliable.
Okay. IEA's Regional Cooperation Center has been instrumental in regional energy collaboration. Give us some highlights of some key initiatives that you've taken.
So I think it's a really interesting and exciting time for us to be based here in Singapore. The IEA's Regional Cooperation Center, it's actually the first office that's been set up outside of the IEA's Paris headquarters in its 50-year history. And that's a real acknowledgement about how important Southeast Asia is in terms of the global energy landscape. So some of the things, we've only been very, very new still, but some of the things that we've already started working on is talking to the key governments in the region about how best we can continue to support them in meeting their net emissions goal, and as I said, in a way that's also very secure.
What do you make of the regional cooperation among the Southeast Asian countries? I mean, you're facilitating a coordinated approach really to a net zero target.
So I think that what's fantastic is obviously ASEAN and the ASEAN member states have a long history and plays a very key role in driving, the ambition in this region from an energy perspective. And the IEA looks forward to continuing to work with the member states here to help deliver their goal.
And energy security, of course, remains a big priority for many Southeast Asian nations. How do you balance, energy security, goals of then transitioning to a low carbon future as well?
I think the key is that it is possible to do both. So if we look, for example, at the role of fuels that have been a very long history in this region, like gas, gas demand growth here in Asia is going to continue to be the driver overall of gas demand growth for the world. And we see gas still playing a role out to 2050 in this region, probably up to about a 50% growth from what it is now. But the past doesn't dictate the future, So, for example, we've also seen a massive expansion of solar and wind in particular in the region, and lots of interest in the newer technologies like ammonia, hydrogen, CCS, and even nuclear, which I know in particular countries like Singapore have mentioned the important role that it plays. So it's that diversification that will be key to energy security.
Okay. I want to pivot to the maritime industry because we are at Singapore Maritime Week. Tell us about the kind of advancements that are being made in terms of trying to get shipping lanes to be more green.
So I think it's really important to have a bit of context around it. So shipping is at the heart of global supply chains and intra-regional trade. And in this region alone, 30% of the trade in this and shipping in this region represents the overall total global trade. So that's a very significant player that Southeast Asia plays. But at the same time, globally, shipping emissions are about 3% of total global emissions. So we do need to think about decarbonizing the sector. But also, very importantly, we need to start planning now for the investments that we will need, particularly for how we deal with the new infrastructure that we'll need at ports for these lower emissions technologies and fuels.
Okay. So right now there's low-hanging fruits, the adoption of biomethane because it's easily adoptable. The ports don't have to be reconfigured. The vessels don't have to be restructured. But further down the road, ammonia, that's supposed to be the fuel of the future for ships.
So you're right, Roland. Biofuels does play a very significant role in the shipping sector. But there are some, caveats. So biomass as a supply is constrained. And there are trade-offs because there are competing land users, particularly for food production and biodiversity. There are also other transport sectors like aviation who want to use biofuels through sustainable aviation fuel. So from the IEA's perspective, we do see low-emission fuels like ammonia and hydrogen stepping up to be a key player and a key low-emission fuel source for the shipping sector. We see that, in fact, by 2050, because ammonia is the most cost-effective of that synthetic low-emission fuels, being the dominant source of fuel for the shipping sector.
Are governments in this part of the world supportive? Are policies in place enough to want to stimulate this investment in infrastructure?
So I think there's already some good conversation, and we've had a lot of good discussion here at Singapore Maritime Week, and I commend the Singaporean government as well as taking a very leading role in this perspective. But there are maybe three key areas in which we could see a little bit more focus. The first one is around creation of demand for low emission fuels. So governments can do more in this space to encourage and unlock that investment and for companies to start using more low emissions fuels. This could be through setting emission reduction targets and ratcheting them up over time. I think the second thing is it is still quite early stage, so we're going to need some financial incentives. Things like grants for actual low emission projects, production projects, and really importantly, how do we think about the port expansion that's needed in order to allow us to refuel with these newer low emissions technology. And finally, just one plug, cooperation is key. So institutions like the International Maritime Organization, governments like Singapore and others in the region, all the shipping companies, they need to work together because it is fundamentally at its heart shipping an international business. So we need to work together to make that happen.